Here's a quick recap of today's developments in Ukraine. The US President Joe Biden has today called for Russia's leader Vladimir Putin to face a war crimes trial. It follows the discovery of evidence of civilian killings in the town of Bucha near Kyiv. Images and video clips show the bodies of civilians in the streets and apparent mass graves. Now, for the past few weeks, our chief correspondent John Cookson has been reporting from inside Ukraine. He traveled from the western city of Lviv, near the border with Poland, to the capital Kyiv, and then on to Mykolaiv, which had been under heavy assault for weeks, as well as to the port city of Odessa. He's now back in London, and he's back with me now in the studio. John, lovely to see you
It's
again.
great to be back, Charles, I must say.
Well, we are glad that you're back, safe and sound. But for the past few weeks, you brought us the stories of the people at the sharp end of the war in Ukraine. Briefly tell us about that conflict as you experienced it.
The first thing that hits you about Ukraine, and you just spend a couple of days there, is how the people are united. And I don't think that Putin could have guessed that they would have been so together. You know, life is tough. The electricity is on, the lights are on, the internet works, but there's a mass movement of people going on all the time, from big cities like Odessa up to Lviv, which is a kind of a station for refugees and evacuees. But there are just thousands of people on the move all the time, and all the things that brings about getting tickets for trains and paying for this and paying for that, and sometimes the credit card system doesn't work, the banking system's down, but there is this enormous spirit, and my mum used to talk about a wartime spirit in World War II, and I can sort of understand what she means about that now, that people share things. I spent many hours in railway carriages, and people shared what food they had. It was very limited.
That's extraordinary.
They shared it. They shared their sausages and their cheese and their vodka, I have to say. It was just extraordinary, and I witnessed no row, upset, any altercation between people, even though they were suffering the deprivations.
So people truly united.
Yeah.
But obviously lots of risks came with this assignment, John, and clearly no story is worth dying for. But was this story worth taking a risk for?
Oh my goodness, yes. I mean, everyone in Ukraine has a story to tell, an extraordinary story to tell. It's often about loss, about loved ones going away to another country to escape the fighting, of leaving loved ones behind. For example, I was on a train going from Lviv into Poland, and the law in Ukraine is that young men have to stay and fight. If you're over 18, you have to stay and fight. So there were a couple of young men on the train with their families, and they were dragged off the train at the border and told, you can't leave. This is just a vignette of life, but repeat that 1,000 times over every day. And you can see the kind of emotional turmoil that people go through.
And so a story that had to be told, but all those people you met and told their stories don't want to be defined by war, do they? I mean, all those people wanted nothing more than to get out of war.
That's true, and I can't emphasize enough how much Ukraine is just a modern European country, and even though there has been fighting for about 8 years down in the southeast, in the Donbass region, it's not something that Ukraine's a massive country. So if you lived in Kiev or Lviv, for example, you wouldn't be affected by it. But everybody in Ukraine is affected, and it came as a massive shock.
I can imagine.
To people, you can imagine lawyers, doctors, teachers, just leading ordinary lives. Suddenly, their lives have been turned upside down by this horrendous thing.
So it could be the UK, couldn't it?
It could be the
anywhere.
UK. And I used to take a lot of taxis. I was travelling by myself, and very often the driver was a lawyer, perhaps, or a teacher, someone trying to earn a crust in difficult times. And you know, we've been affected obviously by COVID, and businesses were closed. Can you imagine what war does to a nation?
Well, and as you travelled through Ukraine, John, obviously you mentioned there are lots of dark moments, but were there also moments of light, of humour, of happiness?
Well, I mentioned the vodka earlier, and I did take a 17-hour train journey from Odessa.
You needed the vodka,
Lviv, and the trains are very stop and go because they go through the night and they liaise with the military authorities. So you'll trundle along for a couple of hours and then it'll just stop in the middle of nowhere. And a lot of these people who were evacuated from the south, as I say, they had bits of food, but they also do enjoy a drink. And there was lots of long live Ukraine, you can imagine, by the time we got to Lviv. So that's a happy memory.
Right.
But my happiest memory of it is just the generosity and the warmth of the Ukrainian people towards me as a complete outsider.
Well, that's a good memory to hold on to. But so after the darkness and the winter of the last few weeks of war in Ukraine, will there be a spring or a summer? Do you see an end to the conflict
at the moment?
soon?
At the moment, no, because as we discussed earlier, the war is now shifting to the east and to the south, and we know exactly what's going to happen there. Russian troops are already bombing cities and townships in the east and the south, and that's a new phase of this particular war, and there's no sign of the Russians backing down. Putin is desperate for a victory, especially for Victory Day in Russia on May the 9th, which is the biggest day in the Russian calendar, celebrates the end of the Second World War, and Putin wants something to deliver to the people of Russia, and I can't see that happening anytime soon.
John, thanks very much indeed, and welcome home.
Thank you.
We're glad you're safe. John Cookson, Arise chief correspondent there.